Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk Bounty video, and welcome to episode 249 of Ask Boss Bounty. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I take your questions from the comment section below and do my best to answer them. So if you do have a question for next week's episode and you want to be featured in the video, be sure to leave that question in the comment section of this video, and hopefully your question will be chosen next week. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode. That video went past 10,000 views, which is pretty awesome for an Ask Boss Bounty. Usually they range from anywhere between 5,500 to 8,000. So to get 10,000 views plus on a Ask Boss Bounty episode, I really do appreciate everyone that watched. And therefore I did get a lot of questions for this week's episode. So I do apologize if I didn't manage to fit in your question this week. Maybe post it again on this week's video and maybe you'll be picked next week. So apologies for that. With all that being said, if you do happen to enjoy the video, as always, hit the like button down below, subscribe if you are new. And this week's episode of Ask Boss Bounty, being episode 249, is sponsored by VC49, which is Fiek Search, the Jedi from Attack of the Clones. I do not have the card back to hand. I actually believe I sold that one purely because I just do not have the space on my walls for all of the figures these days. And that is another figure that I don't have loose as well. So unfortunately I can't show you it, so I'll just have to have an image on the screen of VC49. As I said, it's one of those ones that I have owned in the past, but unfortunately with the amount of card backs that we have these days, just do not have the room, and I'd rather somebody else enjoy it than it be sitting in a box stored away in my loft or whatever. But with all that being said, let's get on to the first question of this week's episode. Damon Whitaker says, question for next week: I know you don't like the gimmicky figures, Christmas deco and hologram, but how do you feel about the McQuarrie concept figures that came out in the Legacy collection? Would you buy them? And if Hasbro redid them and re-released them? So you are absolutely correct. I'm not a huge fan of the gimmicky figures, and a lot of people seem to agree with me on those. If you've seen the reduced prices on those hologram figures in the Black series, I think one from the Acolyte show was seen at $2, which is for me just absolutely crazy. In terms of the McQuarrie figures, now this is something I am a bit of a fan of. I do like these and I do enjoy them. I think they are pretty cool, but I just think with the amount of actual characters from live action that we desperately need in the vintage collection, I would always go for the budget being spent on those first and foremost before anything else. You know, if they are able to get this kind of thing out into the line in some kind of like sub-line or something where they're not having to spend too much money on it, maybe they can use existing sculpts or something like that, then fine. But in terms of like new tooling, budget and things like that, as I said, I would rather it be reserved for actual characters from live action shows. Jedi Ronin says, hi boss, question for next week: how do you store spare loose figures that you are not displaying? I want to look after mine as best as possible. Any advice would be good. Cheers, keep up the videos. I've been watching since 2020 and have not missed a Sunday night episode. I really appreciate that, buddy. Thank you so much for the support. In terms of my loose collection that I am not displaying, I tend to baggy them up like this. So these are what would be called non-acid or acid-free bags, so they're not going to harm the figures whatsoever. Most of these little bags that you can buy are acid-free, and a lot of them, when you buy them, don't actually say they're acid-free, but just, you know, don't get the cheapest on the market on Amazon or whatever, and you'll be absolutely fine. And then I keep these within like a tub, or I think you guys in the States call them bins, clear plastic bins, tubs, whatever you want to call them. A bunch of figures are in there. In these like separate baggies, and then I try and keep all of the accessories that go with that figure in the baggie with them. So that's how I do it. David Stevens says, hi Tim, happy new year to you and the family. Question for next week: if Hasbro were to make and keep a New Year's resolution race to TVC, what would you want it to be? Keep up the great work, David. So let's face it, there are quite a few New Year's resolutions that Hasbro could do regarding TVC, but I think the two most important ones for me are: do not cut corners on quality and accuracy. They're my two major bugbears. You know, reduced paint applications, which we're seeing recently, and inaccurate figures like the Dead Ramiro figure, for example. Two huge things for me, which I wish they would stop doing. Jasmine Martinez says, do you think they'll ever do an Admiral Trench from the Clone Wars? I've got to say, it's probably highly unlikely unless Admiral Trench was voted for in fan polls and won the fan polls like 3 years in a row. it would be a pretty big figure, wouldn't it? Highly detailed, lots going on with it. And yeah, sorry, Jasmine, I just feel that one is pretty unlikely, I've got to say. Midnight Hour 24 says, hi Tim, question for next week. Would you want a Sebastian Shaw Anakin Ghost released in TVC, or are you happy to go with the Hayden version, which is confirmed now as canon? So I've had this question before, maybe a couple of years ago now, and ultimately I would prefer Sebastian Shaw because I'm old school like that. I remember the original version of Return of the Jedi. However, what's stopping Hasbro doing both? Swappable head, job done. The Usual Gamers says, hey boss, question for next week. I've been disconnected from the fandom for a while, so not sure if you've answered this, but with how good Skeleton Crew has been so far, what do you think the odds are we get an Onyx Cinder HasLab? Additionally, in case you've already answered my previous question, do you have a figure from the Skeleton Crew that you want to see in TVC? Thanks, and Happy New Year's. So in terms of the Onyx Cinder, I think that's how you pronounce it. I seriously doubt that it's being considered for a HasLab at this moment in time. I think it will be more like the Ghost. I think they'll probably want to see the popularity rise over the years for that particular ship. I just feel that there's lots of other things that they have got on their minds in terms of a HasLab. And that's not to say that Skeleton Crew isn't good. I am actually quite enjoying it. Your second question there, a figure from Skeleton Crew that I would want. I think the main one that I would really like is Brutus. I think the Black Series version of that figure looks brilliant, and we kind of need some bad guys from that show. We need lots of figures from that show, really, don't we? We've only got the one at the moment, but he's the one that I would go with. GoFan says, question, I love the idea of Pulse exclusive 4-packs of alien background characters with interchangeable heads and maybe hands. They could do it with mostly reuse and could include Thug Body, Noble Body, Smuggler Body, Pilot Body, etc. Then include 4 heads of species like Orange Rodian, Twi'lek, Bith Quarren, Trandoshan, and make the heads interchangeable. I think it would sell well given the mixing and matching possibilities. Your thoughts? I have to agree, it would be pretty cool. I think it would sell well. Personally, I think a lot of people out there would be quite happy with it. I'm just not too sure if it's something that Hasbro would entertain, giving you so many different characters and possibilities in one box for the same price as 4 figures. That's kind of not really how they like to do things, is it, really, if you think about it? But it is a pretty good idea and one I believe that they should explore. Cody Conrad says, question for next week, do you think the community needs to have a top 10 for army builders? For me, specifically clones. So many repaints and retools, and I feel like the clone isn't used enough. Named clones to clone battalions, legions are missing from the line. Army builders like Wookiee Warriors, Rebel Pathfinders, Endor Rebels, etc. The list goes on. Do we need to tell Hasbro what the community wants for army builders and clones? I think yes. What do you think? So yes, absolutely. I'm in total agreement that that is something that would be pretty cool. However, Acrylish Doug did reply to your comment and did say that Yakface did conduct a poll last year, and here are the results. You've got Endor Rebel Commandos in first place, Imperial Snowtroopers, Imperial Sand Troopers, you've got the Scarif Marines, Ewoks Jawas, Mud Troopers, Pite Syndicate, which I've mentioned before, Jedi Temple Guards, and Galactic Marines. And that's why I've got a few of these in front of you here. I'm all for army builder packs, and 4 of the 5 that I've got in front of you there, need redoing before they make a 4-pack out of them. We know we're getting the Hoth Stormtrooper, the Snow Trooper, so that leaves 3 of them. This guy here, the Rebel Commando, you've got the Galactic Marine, and you've got the Elite Trooper, the Kashyyyk Trooper. I would absolutely love all 3 of those to be redone and given the, Army Builder 4-pack treatment. And also the lone guy on the left there, the Gamorrean Guard. I think so many people in the community want more Gamorrean Guards. They've already done a reissue of that figure back in 2018/19, I think it was. And that figure on the secondary market, even the reissue, is getting pretty expensive now. So I know he's a big figure and it probably won't happen, but it would be pretty cool if they just said, look, here's 4 Gamo Guards, and then we can all fill out our palaces and our katanas and things like that. But we probably know it won't happen. But that's the list anyway that Acrylish Doug kindly put up there from Yakface, and I would agree with all of those in the list that the community went for, and I would buy every single one of them, no doubt. David Phelan says, I think blind bag Astromech droids would fly off the shelves. They could easily use the Build-A-Droid parts to make it happen. That way they could have like 10 or 12 figures, then people could mix and match the parts to create their own droids. What do you think? I think on the face of it, that's a pretty cool idea. The only issue that I have with that is that there are only a couple of different types of astromech in terms of the head, and some of those are exactly the same as each other. So for example, if we just take R2-D2 for example, you know, if you had R2-D2 and a load of other droids in blind bags, it would be impossible to sort of feel those bags to feel which droid you're getting. Like with the Lego blind bags, it's sometimes easy to feel for, you know, certain pieces that you know aren't included in other blind bags, a different shaped head or one of the accessories or something like that, and then you can kind of feel which figure that you're getting. So to complete them would be quite difficult in my opinion, and you'd end up having to go to eBay to try and, you know, find ones, or go to Facebook groups and swap them with people and things like that. And also I wouldn't really want named droids from you know, the actual series and films and things like that being in those blind bags. To me, if you're going to do that, they'd have to be just random astromech droids that you want in the background. I wouldn't really want, you know, a droid from The Empire Strikes Back that I really want locked behind a blind bag that I've got to buy 30 to try and attempt to sort of find, if that makes sense. Lamar Avery says, I'm still thinking that Hasbro blew it big time for not creating an exclusive Peli Motto figure for either the Razor Crest or the Naboo Starfighter. At this point, do you think we'll ever get a Peli? I have to agree with you, buddy. I think that was probably the way to get her into the line, and now they're kind of like stuck with how to do it. You could maybe sort of package her up with like a couple of pit droids, possibly like a proper deluxe set that we don't seem to be getting anymore. I think that might be a way of doing it. But Peli Motto sticks out for me because the Black Series don't have her either, do they? And if you look at the new media figures that we've got in the vintage collection, you know, specifically the kind of main characters, then the Black Series always seem to have them as well. And they don't have Peli Motto for that one. The other one that I can think of that they don't have, I'm pretty sure, is the Tusken Warrior, the female Tusken Warrior. They don't have her, but maybe she's going to be on the cards. But Peli Motto for me was quite a big character, and I'm surprised that the Black Series don't have her either. So maybe there's an issue around that, why they haven't done that. Could be something to do with market research. We don't really know. But, you know, I think the chances of getting her in TVC would improve if she was already in the Black Series, because we seem to get them after the fact that the Black Series get them. I think they may have missed the opportunity, but I think she possibly might do well in March Madness. So we'll have to wait and see if the community actually rates that figure quite highly in terms of what they want. Futurama says, we got a separate line of action figures for Star Wars Resistance cartoon. Why didn't we get a line for the Bad Batch cartoon? Well, you kind of did. They were included in those, like, what were they called? Mission Fleet, I think they were. And basically the reason we didn't get them is because the Star Wars Resistance figures didn't really sell that well. They were 5 POA, and I wouldn't really want the Bad Batch wasted in a 5 POA line anyway. We need them in the vintage collection, as simple as that, really. So I think that's kind of why they sort of changed the kid line, as it were, and you got them in there instead. DJ Neil, Bad Boy, says, all the best for 2025. Question for next week. Do you think Lumat, Logray, Attack Commander, and VC-115 Vader will ever get a re-release? Thanks. So 2 of those 4, I think, are entirely possible, and that's Lumat and Logray. I see no reason why Hasbro wouldn't attempt to reissue those. I did think we'd get at least one of those in the 40th anniversary year of Return of the Jedi, but we never did. But Attack Commander, I don't think they'll re-release that one like as a straight re-release, because the figure for VC-05 is too old now. They've got the new, you know, Imperial officer body, which they can use basically for a new Attack Commander. And as for VC-115 Vader, this one here, we got that 3-pack with the evolution of Anakin, and the final figure in that 3-pack is pretty much this figure, but you know, they're not going to straight re-release this one either, because this one has the same issue as the Attack Commander in that the Vader inside this pack is too old now, and they've got that new one. Maybe they will, you know, re-release that figure outside of that 3-pack, but would they use that card back? Or maybe they would use like a better film out for the scene specific Vader that we have there. Having said that, this card back is one of my favorites in the whole line. Love that Vader card back, so cool. Steve DeBurst says, hi BB, happy new year, wishing you a happy and healthy year ahead. Question for next week, do you think that the focus of the Finish the 96 could move or be split with the retro collection in the next few years, given the clear statements that Steve Evans has made recently about returning to the spirit of why the retro collection was created? Second question, will you be doing a feature on your March Madness selections over the course of the weeks ahead? Thanks as always, Steve. So in terms of your second question, I was deciding between either doing a video, explaining my top 25 choices, or perhaps doing a live stream. I had a bit of a conversation with Nick about it, and maybe we'll do a live stream. We'll go through our top 25s together in more of like a sort of conversational format. But in terms of your first question, no, I don't think that they'll do that. I think the retro collection is completely separate to TVC. And when we talk about finishing the 96, it is 100% in the vintage collection. That's what I'm talking about anyway. Super articulated versions of the original Kenner figures on the original Kenner card back. And that's how you finish the 96. I think what Steve Evans was alluding to with the retro collection is, no more sort of new media figures in retro collection. They're just going to go back to mainly the figures that Kenner never made. So that sort of thing is going to be the future of the retro collection. Hector Zapida says, hey Bossk, I've been watching Clone Wars for the second time and I'm convinced a Savage Press figure would be amazing to have in my collection. I really like the character. Do you think there's a possibility that Hasbro releases in TVC this year? Honestly, I wouldn't mind if it was a deluxe package. They could include his double lightsaber and the huge axe the Night Sisters gave him. It would also be great to see a Ventress TVC figure or a version of the Emperor as it appears in Clone Wars with two lightsabers. So it really wouldn't surprise me if Savage Press was on the cards for Hasbro, possibly this year, maybe next year. But I think you might be right in terms of that whole deluxe thing. I could see it sort of qualifying as a deluxe figure, unfortunately, in TVC. I think that's just where we're at the moment. Anything over a certain size these days seems to be deluxe, doesn't it? But yeah, I would say that Savage Press is definitely something that they would consider. I think that they believe that Clone Wars is popular in TVC with TVC collectors, and they've also done Savage Press in the Black Series, and I think it got a pretty good reception, and a lot of sort of TVC collectors sort of expressed their envy when that one was announced. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all, buddy. Reno AZ says, great video, BB. Question for next week. Which Rebels and Ahsoka figures do you think will be announced this year, other than the few we already know? Which ones do I think, or which ones do I want? I truly believe that Agent Kallus is one that they could easily do. As I mentioned with the Attack Commander earlier in the video, they've got that Imperial sculpt now, and ultimately they could make an Agent Kallus figure out of that with the added armor and things like that. I think that's entirely possible, and with all of the other Rebels figures that we've got in the line now, including the ones with the HasLab, they need like the baddie of that series, don't they? So I could really see that one being done. In terms of the Ahsoka series, that's a little bit more difficult. Obviously we're getting Baylan and Shin. I can see them doing Marok eventually, maybe not next year, but eventually. And maybe some of the more easier ones like, Clone Troopers and things like that from the flashback scenes. They're already doing one of those anyway, aren't they? The 501st Phase 1, which I think they called the Lieutenant. But there's others in those scenes that they could potentially do. So yeah, I could see them doing that. Rennie's review says, with the Snow Trooper, do you think they will release the AT-AT driver and hopefully Veers? So I think just because that they are connected both from which film they're in, but also obviously the whole sort of scenes that they're in together, I don't really feel that that necessarily means we're going to definitely get an AT-AT driver and Veers. I think Veers, like Kallus, is something that they could pretty easily do, give us an updated version of Veers. The AT-AT driver, I feel, is a little bit different. That's going to be an all-new figure in my opinion, or it certainly needs to be anyway, but it's definitely one that I would like. He's pretty high up in my March Madness 25, so it's something that I would definitely like, and let's keep our fingers crossed for it. Meter86 says, hey BB, question for next week. As I'm curious, if so many people are selling their ghosts due to the size, it's flipping huge, will this make future large HasLab vehicles less likely to get backed, with fewer people backing, fewer people buying multiples to upsell, etc.? Any more ghost size craft, and I'm going to need to move house. I definitely feel it's a thing with the Ghost. I think a lot of people are actually really surprised with how big the box was, how big the ship is, how much room it does take, and we all have like limited space, don't we, in our collections. Now, this isn't to say that we don't want these things, but I do feel that it may deter the people that buy multiples buying multiples in future, and that will affect stretch goals. And that's my only real sort of concern. I think Hasbro really needs to sort of knock it out of the park in terms of the offering to, you know, make these people that buy multiples continue to buy multiples. And unfortunately, that does often revolve around exclusive carded figures. I think that's where people feel the value is. Some people split those cards out, sell them separately, get them graded, sell them separately, that kind of thing. You know, obviously there's a lot of just carded collectors that only want the carded figures. They don't really want the shit. So I do feel it's a little bit of an issue that we need to keep an eye on, and it'll be interesting to see what the next HasLab is and, you know, what it does in terms of its backing. And as I said, Hasbro really need to knock it out of the park in the offering, because I do feel the people that will be put off are the ones that have bought multiples and they've suddenly got, you know, what am I going to do with these 5 boxes, these huge boxes? What am I going to do with them? I can't get rid of them. There's so many for sale on eBay. I'm now stuck with them. Have I got to keep them for 10 years? Where am I going to keep them? All these things are a reality. So we'll have to wait and see. David Gherkin says, happy 2025 to you and your family, BB. Question for next week. I am hesitant to open the HasLab Hera in hopes of another version being released. Hera's outfit really didn't change over the 4 seasons of Rebels, so how do you think Hasbro could make a variant of her that is different enough from the HasLab release? So I do understand your pain, my friend. These figures are very difficult to open. They're, you know, glorious card backs, and, you know, it's an expensive HasLab to buy to get those figures. And, you know, if you've only bought one, then it is difficult to open them. What I would say is all of them are fantastic figures. They really, really are. With Hera, though, I think she is possibly the only one that we don't have multiple versions of, right? We've got 2 Zebs, we've got 2 Kanans, we've got 2 Ezras. Obviously, we need Season 1 Ezra. So maybe when they do finally get round to doing Season 1 Ezra, which I really do think they should do, and I've got a feeling that he's going to do well in March Madness this year as well, purely because obviously he's the standout one that we need. I could really see them sort of maybe adapting this figure here for a Season 1 Hera Syndulla. I can't promise you that they will, but it seems natural. As I said, we've got 2 versions of all of the others, so why not? All right, so we've got a few 4-pack questions now, and the first one is from Fetmatic. He says, here's my question for next week. Do you think Hasbro's next 4-pack should be all about Boba Fett? The 4-pack will include McQuarrie, Prototype, War of the Bounty Hunters, and ESB. This set would start 2025 with a bang. Happy New Year, and may the Force be with you. So I'm not necessarily saying that it should be the next 4-pack that we get, but I'm in agreement with you that it would be pretty cool. I know that you are a big Boba Fett fan, and there's a few in there that I would like. You know, the Prototype one, the McQuarrie one, I can live without those. Even the War of the Bounty Hunters one, that I could probably live without them. I think the ESB one in there is the one that we want, but for me, we need him on a card back. But if you want to stick him in that 4-pack, then go ahead, my friend. Delvian Sieg says, question for next week. With their appearances in Skeleton Crew and The Mandalorian, do you think there's any chance we'll get a pirate 4-pack, not including Brutus or Vane, who deserve their own cards? Those 2 most certainly do deserve their own cards. And I think the only problem with a Pirates 4-pack is that they are all quite different in terms of their outfits. And I wouldn't really want, you know, just like a sort of bog standard body with a few little changes, and then obviously a different head and hands for depending on what alien it is. I think they're different enough that we would want 4 different ones. And therein lies the problem, because you wouldn't necessarily get all of that tooling budget spent on a pirate 4-pack. But again, it's something that I feel that, you know, would be pretty cool and that we need. I just feel that the problem is that they're all a little bit too different from one another. Reckless Deck says, hi Tim, question for next week. How would you feel about an Endor Rebel Commando 4-pack similar to the Shriek-Hawk Mandalorian set, where you get similar but different uniform variations across the 4 figures? First off, I would be all for them breaking canon and making one of them a female commando, and I think there's tooling bits across many figures at this point that would be very useful for cobbling different looks together. Figuring Dan and Osha's legs, for example, and multiple parts of either existing Cassian Andor figures. Plus there's the existing poncho designs from both Endor, Luke and Leia. Care to do a quick brainstorm of other parts that could be repurposed into making some cool looking Return of the Jedi Rebel soldiers? Yeah, so this guy here, he does need redoing, doesn't it? And it would be pretty cool to get a 4-pack of those in the way that you've described. I'm trying to think of other figures in the line that could potentially have their parts used. I'm struggling. Maybe the Mithril. I mean, what's he wearing? He's wearing like a kind of a jumpsuit. See, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, when you're thinking about the Rebel Commando 4-pack, I want these guys with their trench coats and everything, but I also do want that green jumpsuit version that the original Kenner figure was based on. I think it'd look pretty cool if we had one of those as well. Obviously, the Mithril is a fuller figure in terms of his physique, but he's kind of got like a jumpsuit on, isn't he? Just trying to think. I haven't got one to hand to have a look at, but that's maybe one of them. Possibly, if you're talking about female characters, as far back as the Rose Tico from the 3.75-inch Black series, she's got kind of like a jumpsuit on. Maybe you can use some of her parts, but apart from that, I'm struggling, I've got to admit. All right then, guys, that's it for this week's episode. I want to thank everybody for watching and for submitting your questions. Thank you so much, and also thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members. The extra support you give me is greatly appreciated. It really is. So thank you all for that. Next week's episode is 250 of Ask Boss Bounty. So look forward to that. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we shall see you on the next one.